What's up, guys? Thank you for tuning into this video. Today's video is going to be about my shitbox, my 2000 Honda Accord EX. I made a video about this car several months ago, but I wasn't happy with it. You know, it was just kind of garbage. The driving portion, you could see nothing but the sun visor. So I took that down and I'm redoing it now. And we're going to start off by going over everything that's currently wrong with the car, starting with the exterior and specifically the paint, which, as you can see, is really loving life. It's heavily oxidized and, you know, the car's dirty. It's a rust spot right here, which is interesting. The headlights are all clouded up and they'll probably clean up. Honestly, this paint, with the exception of these rust spots, we'll probably come back with some polish and stuff. It's got its fair share of little dents and dings and stuff. There's another one on the door here. And it's traded paint with the wall of my garage more than once. And this mirror is missing. This happened months ago and I still haven't replaced it. More garage wall paint. The wheels are dirty, but in reasonable shape. This one specifically doesn't have that much curbing on them. Some of them, at least one of them has some good amount of curbing on them. It does have new tires on it. I got some V rubbers because they are cheap and V rubber is entertaining. But realistically, some paint missing here on the bumper. Realistically, the paint on this car, or the exterior condition of this car, is not all that surprising for a 21-year-old car that spent its whole life in Georgia. And now we'll move on to the interior. The interior is in reasonably good shape. It's dirty. I meant to clean it, but I didn't. The seats are in okay shape. It's a little worn here, and there's a bit sticking up right here. But they don't hurt. This seat doesn't hurt to sit in or anything. Like, I could spend 5 hours in this car and not be in pain. The door panel's in reasonably good shape, except for here where it's kind of like eroding off a little bit. This sill likes to come off because I kick it constantly. This door doesn't open. Like nothing happens. The interior of this thing, I would say, has held up really well. It spent a lot of time in the sun. And this dashboard, although it's dusty and needs to be... It's been a while since I've cleaned this thing. It's in good shape. And surprisingly, the dash is soft touch material, including the glove box door on the lower part here. And it's still in good shape. You know, nothing's cracked or anything. The only thing that hasn't held up well to the sun is the steering wheel, which, as you can see, is a little foobarred. And this must be a Honda thing, because I had two Civics before this, and the steering wheels on both of them were screwed. The gauges are gauges. It's the exact same cluster that you get in the Honda Odyssey, and I really like the gigantic speedometer that's like the size of my fist. I think that's wonderful, and there used to be a sticker here for whatever reason. This head unit is obviously aftermarket. It's a Boss Audio Systems, which is, it was cheap. But I've had this head unit before and I like it. The center console, the shifter plate, these clips are all broken, so this flops around. But beyond that, it's in all right shape. The carpeting is all loose and coming off, but it hasn't fallen off yet, so. And this is reasonably sized. I got an OB2 reader, a mask, a USB, a cigarette lighter charger, a pen, and a tire pressure gauge in there. Passenger seat's in real good shape. Obviously, it doesn't get used as much. It's got a little bit of stain there. I really need to get an extractor and extract the carpets from this thing. All the windows and everything work. Sunroof works. You can go check out the back seat. Gonna have to do it from the other door, because this is the only door back here that works. The back seat is in reasonably okay shape. If it didn't have this rip here, it would be nearly perfect, but unfortunately it has that rip there. But, and this, I don't know if this is a cigarette burn or this is where like a plug or a button used to be, but that's there. Carpet's in okay shape. Got some staining on them, but they'll clean up, and I got a set of tools in here. This pocket is all stretched out because it had brake fluid and various other fluids in it that are now on a shelf. All the door panels are in real good shape. And like I said, everything works. Really, I wouldn't say this thing has held up too bad over the years. So now let's check out the engine. Alrighty. The engine in this car is a 2.3 liter 4-cylinder, 16 valve. I believe it's dual overhead cam, but I'm not sure. Someone will correct me in the comments. 233,000 miles. It's definitely a little bit tired, but you know, it's not terrible. The engine itself hasn't had very many problems. The car itself has had its fair share of issues, but that's a topic for a different video. But this engine generally has been okay. I had to get the valve new distributor and valve cover gasket early on when I first got the car. But oh, and these fans are new as well. These fans weren't working. But I'm fairly certain that that's it. That's all I've had to do to it. And it makes 150 horsepower and 152 foot-pounds of torque, which is not much for a car of this size, but I guess it gets the job done slowly, but it does it. This car's also a 5-speed, if you didn't notice. No automatics for me. Go and check out the trunk real fast. This thing sticks up. It doesn't return back down like it's supposed to. And here's the trunk. It has bowling balls in it. It's reasonably big. I've got an air filter in here. Yeah, it's a Fram. Fram air filters, as far as I'm concerned, are okay. Just don't use their oil filters. Underneath the... I'm just going to take these bowling balls out. Alright, bowling balls are out of the way, so I can show you underneath the trunk floor. You get a spare tire. And I have some jumper cables in here. And it's a bit of a mess in here. You also get these nice compartments here, which I like. It's nice how well organized it is back here. Like, here's the jack storage. And you got a nice compartment over here, which has the tire changing equipment and a couple lug nuts and the wheel lock key. You also get this cubby that I'm using to store the air filter that I ended up not needing. And a nice little tray here that holds sodas really well when I'm delivering pizzas. And the trunk closing sound is a nice solid thud. Now I'm going to take this thing out on the road and tell you how a clapped out Honda Accord drives. So let's get started. Alrighty, we are driving my shitbox Accord. As of this recording, the odometer reads 233,153 miles. And the gist of how this car drives is you can feel every single one of those 233,000 miles. It generally feels like an old car. Right now I have all the windows up and I'm running the air conditioning, which I normally wouldn't do because the air conditioning in this car is such a succubus, but I have to have the windows up in order to talk to you guys, so I'll just have to make do. The air conditioning works. You know, it's currently blowing cold, but it's definitely old car air conditioning. You know, you definitely feel when the compressor's kicking on, and it absolutely kills the throttle response, and it displays misfire type symptoms when the compressor kicks on that it just doesn't do when I'm not running the air conditioning. So I only use it when I have to, which is irritating, but you know, what are you going to do? As I'm sure you've also heard while I was going over those speed bumps, getting out of my neighborhood, this thing, it's constantly like there's a pissed off rattlesnake in here. More so when the AC's on than when the AC's not on. It rattles like a mofo in here. It's absolutely atrocious. Normally I have either a podcast or my music or the windows down, and any of those things will drown out the rattles, but I can't do any of that right now. So I and you are just gonna have to experience the rattles. But honestly, that's just old car stuff, and what are you gonna do? You know, it's 21 years old, has 230,000 miles, it's allowed to rattle a little bit. Aside from the lousy air conditioning experience and the rattles, to talk about how this thing drives, let's talk about the engine first and the lack of power, because there definitely is a lack of power, and that lack of power only gets worse with the AC on. When you're driving this thing around when the engine's unladen with no AC, it feels adequate. It definitely gets the job done. You know, you can get up to highway speeds and all that stuff with reasonable proficiency. But then you turn the AC on, and it goes from being adequate to feeling broken. Now, I don't know if something in my car is worn out, or that's just an old car thing, or what's going on, but it's slow. There's no getting around that. It's definitely slow. You know, 150 horsepower in a car like this thing definitely weighs over 3,000 pounds. It's definitely not quick. The manual transmission definitely does help with that, but this manual transmission is a whole nother thing to talk about, and we'll get to that in a second. But before we get to that, we're going to talk about the steering and the handling and the brakes. And the eagle-eyed among you probably noticed that the rotors on this car are absolutely shot, and they are absolutely screwed. And the pads on the back only have 15% left, according to Mavis Discount Tire. So it definitely needs brakes, and that is on the list of things. I'm sorry I keep moving the camera around. I have too much hair and it keeps sliding off my head. So it definitely needs brakes, and that's definitely something I'm going to do in the near future. But I got to do pads and rotors all the way around, because the rotors on both ends have just been pad slapped over and over again, and they're just screwed. The parking brake as well is also a little weak. It just needs to be adjusted, but it is just a little weak. Again, I'm sorry I keep moving the camera around. It keeps blocking my view of the road. And it's crooked, which is driving me crazy. Alright, well, I'm just gonna stick with that. The steering is actually okay. It's definitely old car steering. So it's definitely, you know, it has just a reasonable amount of on-center vagueness. And it tightens up when you're moving, and it actually has you know, for an old ass car like this, it actually has a pretty decent amount of feedback. You know, more than I was expecting. I've driven some stuff with just like the mushiest sloppy steering racks you have ever seen. Like that Pontiac Sunfire that is in one of my cold start videos, even though it didn't start. That has incredibly sloppy steering. But that's you know, par for the course for a GM product of that era. The power steering in this car does leak, and I'm an idiot, and I don't put Honda specific power steering fluid in it. I just put generic power steering fluid in it. So the power steering pump is definitely going to go at some point, and maybe that'll happen while I still own the car, maybe it won't. But the pump itself doesn't look like it's that easy to replace. It's right on top. But it definitely does leak. Thankfully, it's the pump that's leaking and not the rack. If it were the rack, we'd be in trouble. That would probably total this car. But overall, the steering is not bad. As for the handling itself, it's an unholy combination of old, worn-out struts and tires with tall sidewalls on them, which makes it nice for, you know, going over potholes and shit and bumps and stuff. But that also means that there's large amounts of body roll, and, you know, it leans quite a bit. And I've never really pushed this car to the limits, to its handling limits, because that just seems like a pointless exercise. But it does have independent suspension all around. And like I said, I had 2 Civics before this car. And when you pushed those cars to their limits, they would understeer. So I imagine that's what this car would do, you know, with even more weight. And I believe they have the same tire size, 195/65 R15s. The upside to the tire size is that the tires are cheap. The clutch is mildly irritating. It's vague. This is the clutch. I actually had to do the clutch not too long ago. The old clutch, I don't think the old clutch went, but it was definitely time for a new clutch. But the clutch is a little vague, and that's irritating. It's hard to be consistent with it. But oh well. Going back to the handling, or I guess we could talk about the ride. The ride is actually excellent, which you'd expect from tall tires and worn struts and all that stuff. But one thing I didn't expect about the ride in this car is that it's quiet. Like on the highway, if you have the windows up on the highway at 70 miles an hour, you know, you got the AC on, and on the highway it doesn't seem to rattle as much, especially when the road is good. It's silent in here. I was very impressed with how quiet the highway ride in this car is. It's way quieter than I had a Mazda 6 before this. That's actually like one of my very early videos. I'll start up on that car, go check it out. But I had a Mazda 6 before this, and I was expecting that thing to just be a space shuttle on the highway. And this thing is quieter than that was. It's nuts. The seats in this car definitely aren't as good. That car had the best seats of any car I've ever owned. This car just has seats. They're not uncomfortable, but they're not excellent. What else is there to talk about? The turn signal doesn't like to auto cancel on right turns. And what I mean by it doesn't like to, I mean it just doesn't at all. I have to cancel it myself. And that's just something I need to replace. It's just worn out. And this is definitely an issue that's unique to my car. But the wipers are really freaking loud. And the transmission is all worn out, so they stay there instead of recessing to where they're supposed to be. But that's probably just an old car thing. Also, I need to change the wiper blades, but that's not a big deal. The AC is working well. Well, let's talk about the transmission now. The transmission in this car is a 5-speed, obviously. And it is geared tall. way taller than it needs to be. And what drives me absolutely nuts about this transmission is that it seems like first and second are spaced further apart than fourth and fifth. You know, a logical person would expect it to be the other way around, but it's not. You know, you shift out of first, like especially if you're going uphill, you shift out of first at like 30,000 RPM, and then you lose more than 1,000 RPM when you're going into second. So you have to really, really ring out first, and then the engine makes all kinds of noise, and then it rattles like crazy, and it just carries on. And then by the time you get into second, you're out of the power already, because you lose so much RPM between first and second. It baffles me as to why the gears are spaced the way they are. You know, it would make a lot of sense if it had a 6-speed and gear 6 was as tall as 5 is in this transmission. Because the gearing, the gearing for the highway is excellent. At 70 miles an hour, you're right around 2,500 RPM, which is great. You know, the engine's real quiet on the highway. It generally drives really well. But God, the 1 to 2 shift is it's so ridiculously wide. It's terrible. It's definitely the single worst thing about the driving experience in this car. And I'll demonstrate that as we accelerate from the light here. So I'm going to shift out of for 3,000 RPM. Yep, there you go. 3,000 RPM to 1,800 from 1 to 2. And then you lose another 600 or 700 between 2 and 3. And then from 4th, you only lose like 400. It's nuts. It makes no sense to me. I don't understand why were they expecting you to just cruise in second gear all the time? But that combined with the tired engine makes for a car that is real slow, especially with the AC on. But at the end of the day, this car was cheap and this car works. I use the crap out of this car. And in the last 3 days, let's see, let's reference my notebook to see how many miles I put on it in the last couple days. Let's see, from July, it's currently July 26th, and on July 21st, it had 232,524 miles on it. So I've put almost 700 miles on it in 5 days. And that's kind of just the normal use. I'm gonna run this light. The normal use I get out of it. And I just use the hell out of this thing. And for what I use it for, it does work very well. It never complains. And you know, it gets the job done every day. And it gets the overwhelming, like 95% of the driving I do is all in town, and I consistently average 30 or 31 miles per, which I think is great. And this thing, in this big comfy car that has a lot of space inside of it, and you know, when it's not rattling, it's quiet, and you know, it has enough power. I think 30 miles per gallon, that's excellent. I'll take that all day. And that's honestly why I haven't gotten rid of this car yet, because I've definitely thought about getting rid of this thing more than once, but it just works too well for my lifestyle. But I definitely do want something, you know, less shitboxy. And my next car will definitely be less shitboxy. But in the meantime, I will keep using my shitbox. It also has a check engine light on. It's the same check engine light that's been on. It's been on for like 5 months now. It's an emissions issue, and if you turn the light off, it stays off long enough to pass emissions. So I'm not overly worried about it. The only reason that I'll get it fixed is when I sell this car. And I'll do that along other things like the brakes, and I try to clean up the headlights and things like that. So that is going to do it for, God damn it. that is going to do it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed the tour and drive of my shitbox Accord. I'm definitely going to keep this car for probably a good bit longer, at least for another like 3 or 4 or 5 months. And it'll definitely be in more startup videos. I want to do more of those videos for you guys because those are by far the most popular videos on my channel. The problem is that I don't know where the hell to find cars. Like, do you just go up to people and be like, hey, can I start up your car and turn it off right away for a YouTube video? And, you know, I don't want to keep starting up the same 4 cars for you. So I'm sure you've had enough of that. But I will see you guys in the next video. Thank you for watching. If you liked what you saw here, please subscribe. My goal is to have 100 subscribers by the end of the year, and I think I can do that. So I will see you again. Thanks for watching.